Did you think I left you? That I abandoned you? I would never do that to you. I have a God complex and I must be worshipped. Do you understand that? You think I'd leave this? Right when I hit 900 subscribers? Thank you, by the way. If you followed me within the last 2 months that I have not been present, sincerely thank you. That is really cool of you. Welcome. To excuse my absence, I needed to rest. If you have seen any of my previous videos, you know that I quit my job in December. I ended it on contract. I was a 9th grade English teacher, and I kept telling myself that I was getting rest, and I wasn't. And so I needed to kind of crash and actually do nothing while I could. But I missed this. I missed this. Y'all seem to like my video where I sat down and decluttered a lot of books. I think the number was close to around 400 initially, and I brought it down by a pretty significant number. I think I decluttered like 75% of my books, and I've gotten rid of even more since then. So here's why you should trust me, besides the fact that I did get rid of so many books. Because if you're watching this, you might think I'm a book lover, okay? You don't understand. I love my books. I have gathered them. I have made a collection of them. This has been years in the making. One of my biggest regrets in life was when I let my mother sell a bunch of the books that I had accumulated. This was around middle school, at a point in time where I kind of wasn't reading as much. I had to start going to public school. And so my reading faded away. I maintained some in high school, but I mostly just read the books given to me in class, but it kept rekindling. And over the years, I would become very attached to every single book I had read. I'd reorganize my shelves all the time. I would have all sorts of different made up mental genres in my head that I'd shuffle them with. And even with decluttering a lot of those books from elementary school and middle school, of course I still ended up with a lot of books, especially when I decided that I wanted to become an English teacher. And anytime I could find a deal on a book, get a half price book, get a clearance book, especially if I'd heard of it before, even if I'd never read it, I was like, oh, what if my students want to read it? Then I became an English teacher. And the youth do not read what I thought they wanted to read. But it's fine, because I was like, I'll read these books, you know? Like, they're so popular, it must be for a reason. I'll read them. Basically, I have kept a lot of books over the years. I'm in my English masters. Just trust me, okay? Give me a chance. So how did I do it? What's the secret? Well, if you watched my video where I decluttered my books, I kind of listed a lot of criteria I was thinking through at the time that did all together help me get rid of a bunch of stuff. But I realized it was sort of a conglomerated accumulation of a bunch of decluttering advice that I'd gotten over the years from different books, different other YouTubers. And when I made my list, it worked for me, but it was not very organized and not very cohesive. So now I have a, I suppose, step-by-step guide for you, but also a breakdown. A step-by-step breakdown, that's what we'll call it. First, if you're interested in decluttering, you have probably heard of the KonMari method, Marie Kondo's Spark Joy method, and I am going to take principles from that, but I don't think it is perfect for this. I remember when I read her book, she's the one who initially introduced me to minimalism, even though she is not a minimalist per se. That's not really her goal. But her principles helped me get rid of like 75% of my stuff on my first go. It was huge for me. So I'm going to take the ones I like and that still work for me and sort of discard the rest for my bookish friends. So here's the thing. The Spark Joy method, you're supposed to pick up a book individually, look at it, do not flip through it. She is very intentional about that, and I think you should be too. Don't flip through it. Resist. And feel if there's a spark of joy. Some people this works great, some people it doesn't. I would, if it works for you, honestly start there. Or if you're not sure, she suggests starting with the easy stuff, where a book that you like know for sure that you're like, done, it can go. Pick that one up, look at it, recognize that feeling, and then move on to one that you know you have to keep. It's like your favorite book ever. Look at it, feel that feeling, and then put it in the other pile. And if that still doesn't work for you, if every single book you pick up, you're like, I love it though, I got you. It's okay. Another thing I want to take away from Marie Kondo is her rule number 2, to imagine your ideal lifestyle. So I want you to kind of ask yourself why you're keeping those books. For me, it was because I wanted to share them with my students, but also because, let's be honest, I had a big attachment to books. And now I have other goals. I know that I specifically want to live a life where if I were to suddenly move overseas in 3 months, it would be pretty easy to sell a bunch of stuff and pack the rest. You know, like I want it to be a smooth transition. I have that goal of someday leaving where I am in a major way. I'm also a Pinterest girl. I like the cute looks, and I have certain aesthetic goals for my books, for the ones that will be out on display. So make a list, have a few ideas in mind, imagine what your relationship to these books is going to be. Do you want to have fewer books because you want to be more intentional about it? Are you feeling overwhelmed? Are you figure out your why? That's what I'm trying to say. All right, next. Put your books into categories. Book is not a category on its own, Marie Kondo. So much respect. Book has several categories within it. We cannot deny them that. They are a world of their own. They should be treated as such. I'll start with a broader category, move into more specific ones. Broader category, need, use, love. Another common minimalist tool. Effective. The first category should be easy, need and use. I'm just gonna lump them into one right there. Do you have books that you specifically need for work? Are you in undergrad or grad school? There are some books that I'm holding on to specifically because I don't know if I'll need them within the next year and a half, but if I do, I don't want to have to repurchase them. And I'm only holding on to them for the next year and a half, and then that's a good timeline for when I can get rid of them. Like, oh, my degree's done. I know for a fact I don't have to have these books. Some books are simply utilitarian or present for a specific amount of time, and you're like, after this period of time is over, I feel like I can get rid of that. But right now, it's just not like a good time. Life is a little unpredictable, perhaps. So I consider those pretty easy. Once your time of needing those books is over, go ahead and pass them on. Once you're done using them, let them disappear. But here's the tricky thing with books, is those can very easily shift into the love category. The third of the need, use, love. Here is what helped me. If you're decluttering on a mass scale, you've probably decluttered your clothes. A lot of people, they will do that first, or it's like the only thing they'll do is just declutter their closet. And I'm about to introduce you to the concept of applying those principles to your books. Books are complicated. Our relationship to clothes are also complicated. If you think more in terms of home decor, that relationship can also be complicated. The first subcategory, decluttering the imagined you. I heard of the imagined you through a small wardrobe who I've been watching for several years now. She's been a huge help as well. But she encourages you to get rid of things that represent who you want to be. For instance, if you have a hobby like you picked up painting for a month or a week, and then you sort of let it go by the wayside and you feel guilt over holding on to that, or you wanted to get into photography and you bought a cute little film camera and you used it for a few weeks, but then you're like, honestly, I'm never going to use this again. Don't hold on to that guilt of picking something up, buying the stuff for it, then not becoming that person. Don't hold on to the guilt of buying a book thinking I'm the type of person who's going to read this, or I'm going to read this someday because I want to be this person or look like this person. Don't do that to yourself. Let it go. I'll pause here to make a comment about money. A lot of times decluttering kind of gets a bad rap because of the issue of money, of saying, well, yeah, I can sell this or get rid of this, but what if I need it again? It's not necessarily affordable because you can sell it, but you're not going to sell it in most cases for the amount that you would need to buy it back. In my experience with books, you've probably spent a lot of money on books over the years if you have that many, and if you resell them, you're just not going to get the same amount of money back. My arguments there are you'll get more money back than if you didn't sell them at all. And if there's a book that is a little more expensive, or you're a little worried about getting rid of it because of the cost, I think there's reason enough there to maybe put them in a box, put them aside for a time, and see if after 6 months, a year, give yourself a timeline if you ever thought of pulling that box out and getting it out. And at that point, evaluate whether or not it's worth the risk of selling it versus potentially needing it again. Of course, the timeline is going to have to be determined by you. The risk of cost, there's an official way to put that. That has to be determined by you as well. So just gonna recognize that. But with books, hopefully in a lot of cases, you can get a lot of stuff on clearance or at half price if you're okay with having a used book. So always keep that in mind as well, if it's, you know, like a popular novel that we're thinking about. Next subcategory, the old you. The version of you that you used to be. The version of you that fell in love with reading because you read the Hunger Games series or the Divergent series, or the version of you, for some reason the Communist Manifesto popped into my head first, but that's probably not a great example. Books you're keeping because you read them at one point and they were the type of book that you would read at that point in time. I know this can get tangled up with sentiment very easily, but if you can detangle some of the books in this category, I do suggest that you get rid of books that represent the old you. You are a new person and they helped form you, but that doesn't mean that you have to have them on your shelf to represent who you are. You know, your books don't have to be a comprehensive timeline of your life. They can just be a part of it that you can recall at another time. When you're thinking about the books you've read, when you're talking to friends about it, they don't have to sit on your shelf. You read them. They are a part of you, whether or not they are present. The next category, for the aesthetic. Now this one, I'm a gal who loves some aesthetics. I love a good look. Use? Utility? Why? If books are your aesthetic and having a giant library is your aesthetic, I'm surprised you're watching this video. But if it is, and you're like, I still have too many books, maybe consider, what do you want the aesthetic of your library to be? Do you want it to be full of old vintage books? Or do you want the type of library that's full of new, shiny books that have color themes, like you've organized them by the rainbow, you've organized them by series, and you've gotten like the same type of like print, you know, when they're all the same height and they look really beautiful next to each other? Hold on. I just recently started reading the A Court of Thorns and Roses series, and I am going ahead and buying all the books for myself. I decided that after reading the first one, and I was like, I have to read the second. It's got me by the throat, okay? It's got me by the throat. I'm on the third one, it's not in here, but these are beautiful. They have fun, bright colors. They sit right next to each other on the shelf, and I love a bright pop from a book. I don't want a bunch of them, but I like a little moment on a shelf. So I guess I should say, when you're considering aesthetic, ask yourself what aesthetic you're going for and which of the books you can replace to get a new one that fits that aesthetic, or which of the books you can just remove from your life because they don't quite work for you anymore. Another category of clothing and another category of book. New with tags. It looked so good at the bookstore. The back sounded so intriguing. And you bought it. And it's untouched. Maybe it's a brand new book. You spent $25 on that thing. And it is glorious. You don't feel like reading it. You don't feel like wearing it. You bought it. You were excited in that moment. Well then, my dear, the book fulfilled its purpose. It made you happy in that moment, but it does not have to continue to taunt you. Am I saying anything right anymore? It does not have to continue to taunt you for the rest of your days. You can sell it. You might get more money for it since it's in such good shape. Another type of book, and my personal most common type, and also a pretty common category of clothes too, this is a dual video in a way. The clothes you wore once. The books you read once. You read them. Great job. It takes discipline to read a book. It takes interest and time and energy, and you've probably put some of your emotional effort into reading it. If it is a novel, maybe you're into science books like that. I don't know. Maybe you get really emotional thinking about the state of the universe. I don't know. But you invested yourself and you read it. Are you actually going to reread it? Look at it. Look it in the eyes and be honest with yourself. Are you going to pick this back up and read it again? Hold it up to another one of your books. One that you do read over and over again. How do they compare? Not in like terms of content, but like how does the feeling compare, you know? There are some books that you simply read once and they were good and they can go. Next category, and this is a pretty simple one. Clothes and books again. Borrowed. Are you actually gonna wear it? Are you actually gonna read it? If so, then do it. And if not, return it. Especially if it's a library book, give that back. You don't need those fees piling up. Or if the person who lent you that book loved that book and shared it with you because it meant that much to them and you meant that much to them, return their book. This is from the perspective of someone who has lent books before and not received them back. You probably have too if you have that many. Give the book back, man. It's getting heated. The last category I can think of is sentimental books. And it's a harder category to advise on. Some of the other categories that I mentioned earlier might be tied up with sentiment. There's a lot of complicated emotions going on there. How I personally deal with sentiment. When I'm looking at a book, I remember who I was when I read it. I remember how it made me feel, maybe. I just remember the feeling of picking it out in the store, of the excitement of a new book. There's a lot that goes into loving a thing like that. I also have books from my dad. I'll show you. Want to get personal? Australia travel guides. My freshman year of college, I was looking at traveling abroad in Australia, specifically going for a semester to study, take some classes. Freshman year is also the year that my dad died in late October, pretty early on, back when I hadn't even been accepted into the program. And when I went home that week to be there for the funeral, I mean, I don't have to explain that, but I went into his office and I was looking through his books because, again, I'm a pretty sentimental person and I'm a book person. And I was like, well, I wonder what books my dad was reading. And when I looked through them, I found these two. I left his bookmarks in there. He'd marked a few places that I guess he thought I would enjoy, or he probably anticipated visiting me while I was there. And it meant so much that he believed in me so much, that he just knew I was going to get into this program. He was excited about it. He was already planning it when I wasn't even accepted yet. You don't have to get rid of all your sentimental books. You can keep them. I look at these and I tear up thinking about them, and I think that's really valuable. And that sparks joy for me. Sometimes I compare that feeling of sentiment to other books I consider sentimental, and sometimes I'll get rid of them. I'm like, yeah, I have fond feelings for you and fond memories, but they are nothing like that. But like I said, that's like a really personal category for you to think through. It might take you a little extra time. You might hold on to it for a while. You might declutter a bunch, keep it, and then down the line decide you want to actually get rid of it. I've continued to remove things from my life at a greater pace than I add things to my life. And I may not be an extreme minimalist, but I would say I still am one. And that's because it's an ongoing process. So whenever you're going through your books, maybe you'll get rid of 75% of them like I did a few weeks ago. And then the very next day, after you already filmed your YouTube video and so proudly uploaded it, you're like, dang it, I could have put a higher percentage in that title, because you got rid of some more after some thought. That's okay. I'm like looking at my shelf right now like, oh, I should probably get rid of that. I should follow my own advice. Also, if you want a good book on minimalism that is not from Marie Kondo, The Afro-Minimalist Guide to Living with Less by Christine Platt. I have a whole video on this book, but I will go ahead and recommend it here as well. Just if you want a different method of decluttering, a different perspective on it. If you've made it to the end, thank you for watching this video, and tell me, are there any categories that I left out that you considered and you're not sure what to do with them? Are there any philosophies that helped you while you were getting rid of your books or your clothes, since I sort of talked about that a lot too? I hope you have a great whatever it is, and I will see you next time. Wait, I'm not done yet. Subscribe, like this video if you liked it. Follow me on Instagram at Literary Minimalist. I'm trying to post more often, but let's be honest, it's more of a rare gem. It's like a little treat whenever I do post. That's what we'll call it. I'm good at this. Now, have a great whatever it is, and I will see you next time.